Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal Engine. Also, ash on my tomatoes! We're your hosts. My name's Alex, and next to me is, after a long journey off into the wilderness, maybe Mordor, is...
Jacob Feldman. Sorry, you threw me way off there. That was a good one. Yeah, excited to be back. It's been a couple long weeks of travel for me, and I've missed hanging out on the podcast, so... Very excited to be back, and we got some awesome topics to go over tonight. Some of which, as I was just mentioning to Alex, right before we hit record, I'm totally out of the loop on. So it's going to be totally candid for me, even more than normal, I guess.
Yeah, and Jacob, can you tell us at all about what you've been up to the past few weeks, or is it all like top secret, super NDA?
No, it was a lot of conferences. So about 3 weeks. We had the company I work for had a full on-site, so all 300 and something of us descended on Richmond, Virginia. I haven't been to Richmond in quite a while, but it was cool. It was a long week. Got back, and 1 week later flew over to Chicago for a conference called KubeCon. That's all about Kubernetes and man, was that something. Then came back for, I want to say, 3 days, and then flew to Denver for a conference called Supercomputing, which was its own, well, actually a very different crowd than the rest of them, but that's besides the point. So, yeah, I've been all over the place, and I'm very glad that we're kind of at the end of conference season and get to take a break until, I don't know, like March or something like that.
Yeah, you got a little bit of time. Well, cool. It's good to have you back. Definitely some fun topics for us to cover today, just to give people a little bit of a sense of the agenda. I thought we could cover some of what's been happening with the Epic Game Store, both some of the news coming out of the testimonies going on, as well as some of my own personal experiences trying to do some things on the Epic Game Store for the first time. I thought we could talk a little bit about what some of my recent discoveries have been with Unreal Engine and Meta. Some of this is kind of like PSA stuff where I want to kind of warn other folks out there about some of the limitations of the Meta plugin in 3.5. 5.3, I also want to talk a little bit about what the community, the Unreal Engine community, has been doing with the Halcyon VR project, which again is an open source kind of community recreation of the Halcyon Galactic Starcruiser project. And much to Jacob's chagrin, I'm sure, I would like to talk about my adventures with remote pixel streaming and VPNs, two topics that I've been very intimidated about for a couple years now. And then finally, sitting down, I made a lot of progress in one night. Actually, I had several nights with zero progress, and then the floodgates opened and everything worked, and I realized how simple a lot of it really was. So I hope I can serve a bit of a inspiring story for anyone who is also intimidated by those topics. And Jacob can just sit there and be like, yeah, it's really easy. Why doesn't everyone already know that?
For the record, I just want to say this out front, that VPNs in general, just not simple. You would think there are a lot of solutions out there. Some are better than others, but don't underestimate yourself. It is truly a more complicated than anyone would probably guess from the outside.
Yeah. Well, we can dive right into that if you'd like, Jacob, because I can say right off the top that the major thing that I needed to do to get over the hump of everything that wasn't working was the fact that I didn't realize that my ISP, my internet service provider, Optimum in this case, was blocking all my port forwarding. So all the things where I'm like, I don't know why this isn't working. I opened this port, my router says it's opened, didn't matter because it was being blocked one level up. And by the time I actually just messaged Optimum on Twitter and was being like, hey, I got to open some ports. And they're like, oh, what ports do you need opened?
Yeah.
And I literally just listed it in a Twitter DM. And they're like, okay, those ports are open now. And then everything worked.
Yeah,
so that was
that's funny. Yeah, so some ISPs can be pretty weird about certain port. I mean, I'm surprised. I guess it depends on what you were running over that. But usually they only get upset with SSH and stuff like that. I hadn't heard of too many things outside of that. But here, anyways,
Yeah.
but back up. Like, what was the project here for those folks who don't know, and kind of what did you get into?
For the pixel streaming
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So there's two sides of that. One is every time there's a new release of Unreal Engine, I need to go through and update a bunch of the courses that we have for Epic as part of the authorized training stuff that Jacob also used to be a part of. And so I have a pixel streaming course that I've tried to introduce some of the other new things in there, like the multicam feature, and give a little bit of a hint of like the WebXR pixel streaming stuff. June and my team has been helping with that as well. And we wanted to do something about remote pixel streaming. I have like a really simple video on my YouTube channel that's like, hey, how to get started doing pixel streaming in Unreal Engine. And it's very straightforward. But the question that 100 people have in the comments is, okay, cool, that's great for local pixel streaming. What if you want to stream from a remote computer? And up until now, I thought it was like, oh man, like you got to, do stuff in Linux. You have to do stuff on like AWS. Like I thought that there were all these steps to dealing with like turn servers and stun servers. And what I didn't realize was, and I don't know how recent this is, but the fine folks at TensorWorks, friends of the show, are actually the plugin now basically has a PowerShell script that, as long as your ports are open, takes care of like 99% of everything. And you basically run that PowerShell script, and then suddenly like anyone can access your Unreal Engine instance running on your computer from that IP address. They literally will just type in your public IP address from their phone, anything that's not on the network, and they are immediately in that pixel streaming session. I plan on using this to great effect on Wednesday because Wednesday, do you know what I'll be doing, Jacob?
What's that?
I will be playing with an Apple Vision Pro headset, and one of the things I want to test is the WebXR side of things. So I want to try, what I'm literally going to do is have an instance running here on my home computer with remote pixel streaming set up, and I'm going to put on the Apple Vision Pro, put in my home IP address, and see how this WebXR, quote unquote, pixel streaming experience runs in the Apple Vision Pro.
That's going to be pretty cool. Now, fair warning, Apple might, have a pretty nice security perimeter in their network, so you might need to like tether, and it might be pretty crappy. But I'm very curious to hear how that goes. And definitely we're going to have a long chat about Apple Vision Pro after you get a chance to
yeah
try it.
I know I'm going to be signing a whole bunch of crazy NDAs when I get there, but until then I can talk about all my grand plans, which include testing things in Unity, testing things in Unreal, trying flat experiences versus more immersive experiences. I've got some things people are handing me to try out on their behalf, so it should be a pretty good round robin. It's like a 7-hour developer day, so I should learn a lot from what we try out there.
That sounds awesome, and definitely we should chat more about that. I want to make sure, though, I touch on one thing that you mentioned in there about pixel streaming and stun and turn and public IP addresses, like all this stuff. Because these are the things that you kind of don't think about when you're working with like any sort of service that you want to access remotely. And like most people are very used to working inside of home networks because most services are just designed to work where you have your internal kind of local network. You call this a LAN in kind of networking terms. And that network is self-contained, so like your phone can Chromecast to your TV, but it can't like Chromecast to the TV down the street. Stuff like that is your local network, and then everything else is just the internet. And from the outside looking back in, so if you're out in the internet and you're looking at your computer, you don't see every device that's inside your house. You just see one IP address that everything's coming from. That's just kind of how the internet, typically speaking, works, or like networks typically are designed to work. So when you have stuff like pixel streaming, all of a sudden you realize, man, there's all these complications to, hey, what if I have like 3 different pixel streams and I want to expose those to someone on the internet like Alex is trying to do? Well, the pixel streaming plugin or the original design of the pixel streaming plugin, technically speaking, you could have taken Unreal Engine and it exposed the ports directly. It's like port 9000 or something like that. And if you had forwarded that, meaning you told your router, hey, see this computer. This computer is running a server, and I want that computer to be accessible on this port, so that anyone who's looking at my home sees some blob, but it has one port that I specify goes to this computer, right? And you could do that, but the way you're supposed to, quote unquote, is with stun and turn. So what stun and turn does is it kind of does this negotiation on your behalf, where and this is used all the time for services like this, where you have, let's say you have like 10 like pixel streaming servers running inside of your house, and you somehow want to make all 10 accessible to the outside. It actually really wouldn't be very practical or possible with most people's like home internet, because you only have one IP address, and it would be a mess, right? So what stun and turn does is, when you accept an incoming connection, so when someone from the internet hits like a specific port on your IP address, it essentially goes through this negotiation process where it allows for the computer to, the server to have a peer-to-peer connection, like a direct connection to some device externally. And so, like if anyone's used something like Parsec, or Parsec is probably the best example most people would be familiar with, which is like a remote computer access software that would use stun and turn in the exact same way. That's how you can have 5 computers in your Parsec account, and out on the internet somewhere see all 5 and connect to individual computers. It's all just stun and turn. So it's even that, like, stun and turn is incredibly complicated, and some of it I wouldn't even profess to know in depth, but it's really it's not fun. It's not fun for those folks who have suffered through it. So I appreciate, Alex, the the suffering you've been through here.
Yeah, and the great thing to realize was just that I really did suffer in vain. Like, the whole time I was going through this process, I was like, oh, I should really give a tutorial on this, but I was trying so many things, and it felt like whack-a-mole or darts or, pin the tail on a donkey, all those fun games that people used to play back when we were kids. And I created Linux as like a subsystem for Windows, and I started creating turn and stun configurations with that, and there was like a .conf file that like I couldn't figure out how to open, and I had to understand, like, well, you need something kind of like Notepad, but it runs in Linux, and you're going to launch it from there, and then here's all the stuff you have to edit. So I was going pretty far down the rabbit hole of like building stun and turn servers configurations on my own. And then I realized at a certain point that there was a script inside the TensorWorks pixel streaming folder that actually does all this on its own. It actually like launches all of this. And I'm sure there's at least one of our listeners who's like foaming at the mouth, being like, just tell me how to do it. And I actually can. I can tell you pretty much over audio exactly what needs to happen. So if you have built a project with pixel streaming in Unreal Engine, you are going to have a samples folder, right? And that samples folder in your built package has the pixel streaming folder. So in the pixel streaming folder, you go into pixel streaming web servers. You do your, get pixel streaming servers.batch or .sh if it's a Mac environment or Linux. And that's how, of course, you build everything there and get the latest stuff from TensorWorks. That's true, regardless of what kind of pixel streaming you're doing. And then if you go into the signaling web server folder, you have config.json and you have cirrus.js. And in both of those files, there is a part where it asks what the public IP address is. And by default, it's going to be localhost. So, your 192.168. No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of like router. 127.0.0.1. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, so all you have to do is in those two files, you change where it says public IP from localhost to your actual public IP address. So it's going to be, a string of numbers. Keep it inside quotes. That's very important. There's a mistake I made. You save both those files. And then you go into platform_scripts, command or bash, depending on where you need to go. So in my case, command. And then in there, so in the same place where we have run_local batch file, which is in my tutorial already for how you start local pixel streaming, don't click that one. Instead, all the way at the bottom, there is a .ps1 file. So that's a PowerShell file. So if you right click on that and you, sorry, I didn't tell you which file it is. So it's called start with turn underscore signaling server .ps1. So it's a PowerShell file. If you right click on it and you click run with PowerShell, as long as you have the right ports open, it is suddenly going to make your pixel streaming experience ready to run from anywhere. So then you can, launch the executable with your standard, all the same stuff you would normally do for pixel streaming, except in this case, of course, you're talking about that public IP address, and all the other launch parameters work fine. And then at that point, anyone can come and access your computer just through your IP address. The port, and I'm trying to remember the ports that you need to have open because the stun turn stuff is a little bit different. So I can just tell you, at least some of these ports were correct. I probably opened more ports than I needed, but I did port 3478, 80, 8888, 1194, and then 12973 and 12974. So as long as, you're okay opening more ports than is probably necessary, that's what I was able to do. And from that point on, everything with remote pixel streaming was working great for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I'm glad you pointed out that script. That's definitely pretty useful. So then you decided to go a different route at some point, right? So tell me
yeah,
what
so
happened.
there were Right, so there were a couple things that I was trying to do here. Right, so I already mentioned like updating our course, but then for Christmas Carol VR, which Jacob and I talked about at length last year, that's of course an ongoing show we do every year. And in the past, of course, we've always done this with pixel streaming. This year, we're also trying to allow people to just download the experience and run it on their own local computers, ideally through the Epic Game Store, but we'll get to that. And so one of the other fun things we wanted to have was for our cinematographer, where we're going to, of course, have like a live stream that's, cutting to different camera angles and running on YouTube. We wanted to let our camera operator, Jackie Roman, use the VCam app from Unreal Engine, which for those who don't know, uses AR to allow you to like move a camera around and basically have it be this magic window into the Unreal Engine experience. And so I thought, well, gee, it's probably going to be running on my computer. We're going down to Miami on Wednesday for FilmGate Interactive, where we're going to be premiering the show in the first place. We're not going to necessarily be running it locally from there. Jackie's going to be traveling. So I was realizing that I need to have a way that Jackie can run the VCam app from her iPhone and ideally just always be connecting to my computer here at home, which I know will always be configured and up and running and ready to go. And I was trying to do that through remote pixel streaming. And I was trying to use the VCam app, which had some really fun little glitches. Like I noticed that if you have pixel streaming running, it will show you actually the drop down of like default streamer, VCam, and also if you have multiple instances of Unreal Engine that are set up for pixel streaming, it'll show you all of those. I didn't realize that you can actually have 10 instances of Unreal running, and they will all show up as options for what view you want to see when you have pixel streaming going on, which is kind of fun. But the VCam app was clearly not designed for this with remote pixel streaming, because whenever I'd click on VCam as an option, I would get a totally gray screen. And so what I came to accept was VCam just is not designed to be used with remote pixel streaming. So then I went down the route of another thing that's intimidated me for a very long time, which is a VPN. And for those who don't know, a VPN is a virtual private network, I believe. Yep. And it is for getting everyone on the same network with the same, IPv4 style addresses. And I've heard it's been recommended to me to use this in the past for things like the multi-user editor in Unreal Engine, where if you want to have a bunch of people all looking at the same map at the same time and you're all editing things together and really taking advantage of the one file per actor stuff, then you want everyone on a VPN, and that's going to be the best way to run that. Anything you want to say, Jacob, before I continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think. You're totally right. So a VPN, virtual private network. A lot of people are probably familiar with it with ads for NordVPN and let me access Netflix content in another country and stuff like that.
Yeah, most people think of it as a privacy thing. I'm trying to hide what I'm doing.
Yeah, so it is the same thing, but it can be different in a couple cases, right? So the essence of it, like Alex was saying, is to have everyone on in the same address space. And I'm going to go back into networking terms for a second, but
Do it.
In networking you call these subnets. So a subnet is like when you see an address, like Alex gave a great example, 192.168.0.1. Most people's home networks, and these are the local area networks I was talking about, have a few addresses within 196.168, and that grouping are called those are called octets each one. So 196 and 168. Oh, sorry, 192 and 168. That's just like an industry standard. But most people, if inside your browser right now you went to 192.168.1.1, you would probably reach your router, and that's just a matter of convention. But with a subnet, you essentially give a router, the thing that like routes all the different internet traffic all over the place, or even traffic within your house, like to different devices. Those devices essentially acquire a range of addresses that it considers its own. So like 192.168 in most people's houses is your local area network. And so every new device that you add to your Wi-Fi and everything else gets an IP address in that range. So usually, it's kind of like 192.168 is fixed, and then the next two octets are what changes every time you add an address. Now, if someone external to your house typed in 192.168.1.1, they would not get your router, right? That would be pretty silly.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called a subnet. Like, not all subnets are the internet. In the internet, you have public IP addresses, which are the exact same thing. But it's agreed upon that the internet is the network that has, everything connected to it. And so, like, public IP addresses are a bit different. But essentially all VPN does is when you go ahead and like log into NordVPN or any sort of VPN, what it's going to do is acquire an IP address inside of the subnet of the thing you're connecting to, and then your device is essentially going to mimic as if it has that IP address, even though it might have a separate local IP address, it might have something else. So from the perspective of someone who's receiving your traffic, it looks like your traffic is coming from an IP address at this remote location, but from your local device, like, it kind of looks normal, right? Like you're just receiving traffic from the internet. So like from a privacy perspective, like again, if you're like trying to watch stuff on Netflix that you can't get in your country, your traffic is essentially getting bundled up saying, all right, you're going to send it to this server that acts as a VPN, and that server is going to like wrap it up, put a lock and key on it, say, no, the IP address is actually this, and then send it off. Like that's how it works. Like for something like NordVPN. But there's a whole lot of other VPN solutions out there that are designed for like what really you call bridging, which means like you have two remote sites or you have devices that are spread out that you want to share a single subnet, like you want to kind of all have the same IP address space, so that like if any device within this network searches up an IP address, it's not getting just some random, like let's go back to that router example, like so any of these devices, when they hit up 192.168.1.1, they get the router of the network that you've created, right? So VPNs, like I said, can be very complicated, and they have a whole lot of different use cases. But for something like what Alex is describing here, it's definitely useful if you like want to have a bunch of devices to reach a specific IP address, like within a home or within an office. Like all those are great use cases, and probably people have used one even if they don't think they've used one.
Yeah, a lot of times if you get handed like an office computer, like a laptop or something, it'll be pre-configured with an office VPN, which gets used for a lot of different things, but also like, monitoring what you're doing. In some cases, making sure that you're staying productive, as the case may be.
Yeah. There's definitely a wide range there. Most offices and like most IT people will have you create a VPN, because what it means is that all your traffic is going to get funneled into your office or some footprint that they control before it reaches the internet, and so they're able to filter everything. They're able to block you from reaching certain sites, stuff like that. Like IT folks really like it because it kind of creates a single point of entry and exit for all of the traffic from the internet that they can then kind of control better, because it's like your device is getting an IP address at that remote location, and so as far as the internet's concerned, that's your IP address.
Yeah. Now, a misconception I had, Jacob, do all VPNs cost money?
No, they definitely do not. But there are definitely lots that do cost money. But for example, like OpenVPN is probably one of the most popular solutions out there. It's not. I wouldn't exactly call it straightforward either. I think that would be a little generous, but it's definitely pretty ubiquitous. And so if you like, I don't know, like I have a Unify router that I use in my home, and it has an option to like import an OpenVPN config to connect to a network somewhere else. So it's pretty common. But Tailscale, I think, was the one I mentioned to you, Alex, and that's a really nice free solution that I'm curious. Did you get a chance to try out?
No, I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but it was interesting to see that, kind of like what you're just describing, Jacob, that I started to go down the rabbit hole of like configuring all the OpenVPN stuff from scratch, and then I realized that my router also, and this is fairly common for routers, does have a way that kind of streamlines this built in. So I have a Netgear Nighthawk router, and if I go into my router configuration settings, which a lot of times will be 192.168.2.1, a lot of Netgear routers are also www.routerlogin.net, and if you're on your home network, it'll go to your router page. In the advanced section and then advanced setup, there is in fact an option that says VPN service, and so the Netgear router is in fact connected to OpenVPN, or gives you the option to. So there's a little checkbox. And then something else, I guess, to be aware of is it told me, at least, it's like, okay, so if you want to use the OpenVPN setup here, you either need to have a static IP address, which is pretty rare if you have a standard kind of like consumer home internet, or you need dynamic DNS. And I did not think I had a method for making sure I had a static IP address from home, so I went the dynamic DNS route, and that also was able to be configured mostly from my advanced settings in my Nighthawk router. So right above the VPN service section, there's dynamic DNS, and there is the ability to do this either through Netgear's dynamic DNS service, noip.com, or dyndns.org. And so you create a free account, you put your login settings there. It's kind of like setting up a website, but you only need the DNS settings. You don't need all the other stuff. And then you're pretty much good to go. And so then I did a test where I got off of my home network. So I was just using like my cell phone data plan, and then I hit the little toggle in the OpenVPN app, which I think is called like OpenVPN Connect. So suddenly it says, okay, you're connected to your home network, which, by the way, would mean that if I was in a different country, I could watch United States Netflix if I wanted to. But it also meant that I could now open the VCam app in Unreal Engine, and it thinks I'm still on my home network. So then, whoop, I've connected to the VCam app, and now I have this way to walk through an Unreal Engine experience like our Christmas Carol world and operate a camera, which is really fun. Which also made me realize, though, that it's also just a very cool way to demo any Unreal Engine project that any of our listeners might have and want to show off, because you can just have the project running on your powerful home desktop computer, and then you could be at a conference or at a networking event or something and say, hey, by the way, check out this Unreal Engine experience I made. You pull up the VCam app, you're using a VPN, you go into there, and then you let people just use an iPad or a phone or whatever to like walk around the experience and get a pretty good sense of like how it feels. No need for a VR headset or anything like that. It's just like a cool little like virtual scouting tool for moving around any Unreal Engine project. And the virtual camera, by the way, for anyone who hasn't tried it before, very straightforward. You need the virtual camera plugin enabled in Unreal Engine, and then you need to drag the virtual camera into your scene, and then you just need to make sure it's enabled. And then there's all sorts of crazy touch interface tools for changing film back and exposure and flying around. But you don't have to touch any of those. Like at its core, it's like you're holding a camera and you can walk around with it.
Yeah, very cool. And one last note on VPNs, and then I promise I'll stop boring people
Yeah.
with this content. But if you do decide to like go inside your router and play around and like set up VPNs and stuff like that, just remember that typically speaking, like VPNs require actual like computation to happen. And so if you do not have a fairly modern or fairly robust router, you might find that the performance of your VPN is pretty poor, just because they're not built with essentially CPUs fast enough to handle it. So definitely, like, if you enable VPN, then you're like, oh my god, why is everything so slow all of a sudden? Well, you might be actually just throttling the hardware you're running on. So keep that in mind when you're running a VPN. Another thing to consider, and one of the reasons I recommended something like Tailscale, is Tailscale super interesting because you essentially just install it on any device that you want to access remotely, or again, you're just building this subnet. You just install it on everything you want. It gets allocated an IP address right away, and then on any new device, you log into Tailscale, and all your devices are there and accessible, and it has DNS and everything else. So it's pretty nice because that means that the physical hardware device that you're running on also is doing all of the stream encoding, decoding, like all the traffic stuff on your local computer. And so if you have a computer that like has a CPU in it, which all computers should, but particularly if it's like a gaming PC that has a modern CPU in it, you'll see some pretty decent performance there. And yeah, so definitely, I definitely recommend something like Tailscale if you're just kind of getting interested in this stuff. But like OpenVPN is definitely industry standard. You'll see a lot of people talk about things like IPsec, which is just another like protocol for setting these up, which in my opinion is just way too complicated. But definitely it's an interesting topic, and I recommend everyone like check out something like Tailscale if they're interested in setting up their own kind of network like this.
Yeah. And a little bit of information about the rabbit hole I went down was comparing OpenVPN and WireGuard, which is another free VPN service. And the consensus from the Reddit community seemed to be that OpenVPN is a little more complicated to set up if you don't have the benefit of like a router that helps you out. But it works for a wider variety of configurations. And WireGuard is one that is a lot easier to set up than OpenVPN, but it has narrower configurations and use cases for what you can do with it.
Yeah. I should mention that the major difference between like stuff like WireGuard, OpenVPN, IPsec, all this stuff, and Tailscale is that by default, Tailscale does not funnel all the traffic through one node, right? It's essentially creating like a mesh, like everything is kind of interconnected in a way. You can configure that, I guess, in Tailscale. You can create what are called exit nodes, and an exit node is where you funnel traffic to reach the internet or some other service. So there is a bit of a difference there, worth calling out. I've actually never played around with WireGuard, but yeah.
Cool. And one last thing, when I was mentioning earlier, the ports that I had my ISP open, 12973 and 12974, I did those specifically for VPN. Those weren't related to remote pixel streaming.
That's interesting. 12.9. I think maybe just ISPs don't open anything over like 9,000 or something like that. That's weird.
Yeah. Also, I was, and I don't know if they did open it. I think they did. Technically, for Optimum at least, they won't open up port 80 unless you're a business customer, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. It's super easy to get pretty wrecked, because like anything could like start up an HTTP like server and just start serving files off your computer. Just because most security networks are just designed to accept port 80. So like if you're doing this over the internet, like yeah, that makes sense. But then again, it's also just a nice feature to have in a lot of cases if you're like trying to build a website and you want to try it out. But
yeah, good for testing. Cool. Ready to move on? Next topic.
yeah, we probably should before I put someone to sleep talking about VPNs.
I really hope this is interesting to like five people listening. Please let us know. We always enjoy reading the comments and all that. It's great to hear what people are interested in us talking about, because Jacob and I have such a wide range of interests. We can pretty much jump on about anything. Maybe we'll do a Lord of the Rings episode sometime or something like that.
We got to find an Unreal Engine kind of tie in there. Did they make that?
Yeah, I'm
game?
sure there's someone out there building Middle Earth in Unreal Engine. That wouldn't be a hard Google search.
There was like a really bad Lord of the Rings game that came out recently.
The Gollum one?
Yeah, like was that Unreal Engine by chance?
Oh, I hope not. Oof, that was embarrassing.
I'm gonna look that up. We should.
Yeah, real quick before I forget, quick commercial break. Yesterday or 2 days ago, my talk from Unreal Fest came out. So if you actually go to the official Unreal Engine channel, you'll see they have a talk called A New Virtual Reality, a 5,000 square foot VR experience for the Four Seasons Lake Austin private residences. And this is the 53-minute long talk that Jose Uribe, Neil Griffiths, and I gave to talk about our crazy project that we've been hinting at a little bit in the project. So this is the most public information we've ever been able to give about the project. You actually get to see what the showroom looks like, hear a lot about the Unreal Engine tips and tricks we learned along the way, crazy stuff with like local multiplayer, and I hope people enjoy that talk. So be sure to check it out if you're interested in such things.
Yeah, very cool.
Cool.
I have a lot of Unreal Fest talks I got to catch up on.
Yeah, most of the ones I'm waiting for still haven't been posted yet. I really want to see Chris Murphy's annual thousands of tips in Unreal Engine. That's not out yet. So I got a new headline here. So Jacob, here's the news for you. Yep. The Epic Game Store still isn't profitable nearly 5 years after launch. Subheading: Not so epic, says IGN.
That's a good one, actually.
Yeah. So before I give kind of my take on all this, what's your visceral reaction to this? Does this make sense to you? Is it surprising? What comes to mind?
My visceral reaction is that this isn't surprising at all. With how competitive these stores are, the fact that they've been giving away free games, usually that's a sign that you're trying to buy up market share. And man, that's a really tough business to build, because you're competing against lots of services that are doing the exact same thing. Like, you're not really innovating that much on the game store idea, And I know from my perspective, like, I've bought games on Steam, just because it was open on my computer and the Epic Game Store wasn't. But if the Epic Game Store was already open, I would buy it in there. It's like there's really I have no affinity towards either one. I don't know.
I mean, for anyone with a Steam Deck, I think you can play Epic Game Store games on the Steam Deck, but it requires a few steps to get there. So I definitely lean naturally toward buying things on Steam, just because it's going to be so easy to pull it up. Also for VR, a lot of people don't even know that games you get from the Epic Game Store that are compatible with VR, things like Subnautica and whatnot, they will run in VR, but there's no like pop-up that tells you like, oh hey, like Steam VR is active now, or the Oculus runtime is active. So I know a lot of people who do buy VR games, they're like, well, I can't buy it on the Epic Game Store because I need to run Steam VR, and they don't realize that the two are not mutually exclusive. You can actually have that working. I know people complain a lot about the Epic Game Store not having reviews. The fact that, you know, the Epic Game Store has had some timed exclusives, which also is seen a little bit as like kind of anti-competitive and not good for the larger ecosystem. For me personally, I just really want the Epic Games launcher, forget about the store, to load faster. Like, I just want to be able to get everything in there running quicker. And I'm surprised after all these years, like, it still feels slow, even on a very powerful computer.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they put a lot of focus into like how many different authentication methods you could use, which is definitely appreciated. I had some issues in the past where I had bought a game on an email and then used a different, you know, authentication method that I felt was like more logical later on, and then I was like, where's my game? And had to go through a whole, you know, I don't know. But it doesn't surprise me at all that it's not profitable. I mean, you're taking, what's their cut now? It's like 12%.
Like 18%, I think. Yeah, it's something,
it went up
something low.
recently. 18%. I mean, that's a lot. You know, like they're getting a cut, but it's, you know, that entire segment is really just a race to the bottom, right? Like, you're just lowest prices, you know. And I hadn't even thought about the Steam Deck stuff. I mean, that's very true. I don't have one, and I'm thinking maybe at some point I'll need to. They just released that OLED version, which
I have it right next to me.
Oh, really? You got it already? Oh, man. You suck, man. You get all the fun stuff.
They're all things we use for work. Like, we bring the stuff to conferences and show stuff on it.
Yeah, I gotta figure out how to justify, you know, expensing that one. But yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a very good point. You know, the hardware that Steam is making now definitely has a pull for folks. But realistically, I guess without a Steam Deck, I don't care, right? Like, I'll buy it on either, and that just doesn't seem like a sustainable business. So
yeah, and I think everyone is still kind of waiting for like something that is a friction difference, or like something where Epic can clearly say like, here's why it is so much easier, more fun, whatever, to use games purchased on the Epic Game Store versus Steam. And it hasn't really felt like there's been a good case for that made yet.
No, I haven't seen anything. You would think that like even more it would be like highlighting Unreal Engine games, or like there'd be some sort of synergy there, but I haven't really seen that either. I feel for them that I don't know, how would you innovate the games marketplaces? Well, that kind of died when GameStop died, you know.
I mean, literally just riffing on what you just said about like highlighting things like made in Unreal. I mean, how cool would it be if every Unreal Engine game you bought off the Epic Games Marketplace had like some kind of, for lack of a better term, like easy modding attached. Like, mind you, it's not that difficult to mod things, but just a simple route through the Epic Game Store where it's like anything made with Unreal Engine, you're going to be able to extract certain assets or environments or something from those games.
Or they did something like that VR plugin, right? Like where you're able to put everything in VR.
Yeah, the injector from Praydog. Yeah.
That's a good point.
So make something like that official in the Epic Game Store, and it becomes a reason to get certain games on the Epic Game Store, and for people to even think about building more of a community around the Unreal Engine specific game that they're making.
Yeah, this is a good point. Maybe they need to buy that idea off us, Alex.
That'd be great. Yeah, please. We don't have any sponsors yet. We're not even trying to get sponsors, but if someone wanted to come to us and say, hey, by the way, Epic likes that idea and wants to pay for it, that'd be great.
Let us know. So what are the details in here? Like, what was reported?
Yeah, so this is from a testimony related to, I think, the Google lawsuit going on right now. I'll just give a quick skim of this. Epic has thrown buckets of despite all the they don't give any extra information here. I guess the idea was just that, yeah, Epic Game Store boss Steve Allison said on the witness stand that while the store isn't profitable yet, Epic's goal is still primarily growth. According to The Verge, emails revealed during the Epic versus Apple trial actually suggested the company was hoping to claim half of all PC gaming revenue. Right. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to say it's like growth focused is like, yeah, that's just like you're trying to buy up market share, which is again what I kind of expected. They're just giving away free games, But
right. And so when the standard is still, App Store for Google and Apple and the MetaQuest store, they all take 30% off the top. And as of this writing, which is from a couple days ago, it says the Epic Game Store continues to offer publishers and developers an 88-12 revenue split compared to Valve taking a 30% cut. So, yeah. Right. And Epic also launched the First Run program, which trades 100% of revenue for 6 months of PC exclusivity. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all those are compelling. Don't get me wrong. I think that's great for some games. I think if you're a AAA game developer, you're going to be launching it on every platform you can.
Yeah.
Especially since Epic doesn't have a first-party console or something else. It's like you can't do... You're not Microsoft where you have... your own game store, streaming platform, PC OS and hardware and console and everything, right? And like it's a bit different. So yeah, I don't see a compelling reason for for AAA dev. They'll make more money on Epic Game Store maybe, but they don't.
But if they only get 20% of the purchases,
they're not gonna take that risk. So I don't know. It seems tricky. It doesn't surprise me necessarily, but I wish them the best. Like I don't think it's a bad platform.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's. Actually, I think Steam is pretty bad overall. Like it seems old and like it's still pretty hard to find good games. Like I was in like a game queue. Like they do those things where it's like, oh, check out your game queue, all the games that you might want to play. And it was just terrible. It was like, like how do you possibly think this is what I'm interested in? Like,
right?
It was very strange. That whole platform feels old, and yet,
agreed.
It doesn't stop me, I guess, because I'll go onto Steam when I know what I want to buy.
Right.
Which I guess is part of the point. But I actually think if I were to like look for a new game, I probably would go to the Epic Game Store. So maybe there is something there, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about my personal experience with this stuff recently. So again, I'm going to keep talking about Christmas Carol things because that's 80% of my time right now. We wanted to get this year's Christmas Carol VR experience ideally available on Steam and the Epic Game Store. We hit a brick wall pretty quick with Steam because Steam right now is very anti-AI, and as devout listeners of the show will remember from our little Charles Dickens experiment on the show, we have in-world AI as part of our experience, and it didn't cause Steam to outright reject our app, but it caused them to stop responding to our questions about, hey, is it okay that we have an AI character that we're using at the beginning of this live show? So we kind of gave up on Steam and said, okay, fine. And Tim Sweeney had a Twitter post where he's like, hey, anyone doing AI, come to the Epic Game Store. And we thought, great. So we got everything set up in the Epic Game Store a few months ago, and we were doing like internal dev tests. And then tickets went on sale a few days ago, and we're like, okay, great. Let's make this public so that other people can download the experience. And then we saw, oh, wait, there's still a bit of a review process. Okay, that makes sense. We're like, we should have pushed this for review sooner in order to make it public. But then we thought, well, at least what we can do is we can get a bunch of codes, because I have plenty of friends who have done things like this on Steam where even if something is still internal, they're giving out like early access, promotional review code kind of stuff, and anyone can enter that and get the game. we realized way too late that you can't do that with the Epic Game Store. You still have to go through the review process. There's still like these other steps of getting to a point where Epic needs to like sign off on you giving out internal codes. Now, there is one thing we could do, which would be we could literally add people one by one as like internal play testers, where we say like they're part of our organization and they're like a player group. But the thing that's confusing with the Epic Game Store is you can give them all codes, and if they enter those codes in the Epic Game Store, it'll say redeemed. It'll just say redeemed. It won't even say what, but nothing will actually happen. And it makes it very confusing to give out those codes and not understand if it worked properly for someone, because what needs to happen is when they redeem it, it needs to say redeemed and actually say the thing that, you know, actually worked. And it's only going to work if their email, oh, I'm sorry, no, here's where it gets really bad. It's not their email, it's their Epic ID number. So here's the other thing. You have to ask every single person to go into their Epic account, go to their account settings, and find that super long string of like numbers and letters. That's the thing that you need to put into, you know, in this case, the Agile Lens account for every single person who is going to be getting a code. So long story short, at the moment, we're like, we're going to wait and see, and hopefully the app gets approved for the Epic Game Store. But in the meantime, it's like Google Drive, folks. Like, you can get it off Google Drive. It's not too big of a download. Hopefully that'll be okay.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope, did they say how long the review process is?
I heard anything from a few days to a few weeks, and it just depends how backed up their queue is. And, you know, I'm sure things like holidays don't help. So who knows? We've just decided not to rely on it. And if it comes through, it'll be a nice bonus to tell people, hey, this will actually be available. The thing we were most excited about was version control.
Yeah.
When we've done the show in the past entirely through pixel streaming, it's been very easy to, you know, spin up our kind of like golden image where it's like, here's the latest build, and now this is exactly what everyone else is going to have, all in the same specs. You know, everyone's going to have an RTX A6000, and that's very straightforward. In this case, we were like, well, gee, like, we're going to keep updating the build because we always have new features we want to add and little bugs we want to smooth out. But now we needed a way to make sure that people are patching the build properly so that no one's using an older build to join a live show that's 2 weeks from when they downloaded it. And so we were hoping Steam or the Epic Game Store would at least be showing people, hey, there's an update. And in the meantime, we just pushed a feature last night that's a very straightforward thing where when you open up the experience, when you get to the lobby, it will tell you in big letters your current version, what the latest version is, and if you should update. So, you know, it's not perfect, but it's like an okay system for all the lessons we're learning right now.
Yeah, well, that all makes sense to me, though. So, like, can we get some hints on what's to come with Christmas Carol for those devout
Yeah,
fans?
sure. We can do a little preview. First of all, I want to make sure our listeners know that right now there is a Black Friday discount code. If you go to xmascarolvr.com, which I've got on the screen behind us, and you enter code "What day is it?" It is our Black Friday sale, and you can actually get 50% off the ticket sales. So over here, we've got xmascarolvr.com/tickets, and we've got two different experiences. So we have our live stream, which again, we'll be using VCam, and I've got this cool camera system set up, which audience members can try out as well if they're using the interactive version, and they can snap between different cameras using the keyboard keys 1 through 9. I designed this system that basically attaches to different metahuman bones, so it'll have like a consistent over-the-shoulder shot looking toward another character, or like a wide shot, or a rotating aerial shot. So it's kind of a fun like cinematography game people can play on their own. That's all with the interactive pass. If they wanted to do that themselves, the live stream pass is like a YouTube channel. So you just get to watch the live show and enjoy it with your family, sit on the couch with your friends, family, enemies, and that looks really good. We'll be doing that on a very high-end version of the experience running on a RTX 4090. But you'll also see all the people who are like interactively in it. So the interactive experience, it will work both in VR and also in kind of your standard 3D game environment. We do have a little thing that runs at the beginning if you download the free lobby experience, and that will actually tell you, hey, your computer actually isn't powerful enough to run the show. Sorry, And in that case, like we might, help people out with pixel streaming, but first we want to see how many people tell us their computer isn't running well with it. But yes, we've got a little like download the application for your PC here. It's going to kind of trap you in the lobby until you've bought a ticket, and then there's kind of an escape room game, and it gives you the steps to doing the escape room, and that's actually how you access the full live show. You'll also notice that it says season pass. So we decided this year, because in all the previous years we've done this, the show changes so much over the number of shows we've done. And this year we're doing more shows than we've ever done before. So rather than selling a ticket to an individual show, we decided to actually go for like a bit of a season pass model here, where you can pick to say basically like, here's the first show I want to go to, whatever. And it's useful to see when all the performances are. I think back on the first page, we have all the list of performances. Yeah, here we go. So starting Friday, December 1st, going through Sunday, the 24th. And we're basically saying buy a ticket, but then come to as many of the shows as you want, because every single one is going to be different. There's always things that we're adding, trying out, testing. There's a much more interactive component with the audience this year, because everyone in the audience has the ability to like type things out that will appear below them or speak them. And then Ari Tar and Debbie Deer, who are our live actors, they'll be able to see those things and respond to you. And it's going to be fun. And of course, the AI thing is quite nice as well, because you get to have this great conversation with AI Charles Dickens at the beginning. So yeah, it's going to be a fun show, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've gotten a chance to see it since you started doing it. I'll definitely be watching it again. It's something I look forward to every year. Honestly, it's always a great time, and you've really been pushing the boundaries this year. So I can't wait to see everything you're doing.
Yeah, it's definitely our little sandbox. It's like our excuse every year to take all the things we've been messing with and learning and then putting it into something that feels very much like our vision and not client work. So, we do a thing for Vodafone to have like an AI showroom with a metahuman who can talk to you about a car. And we take everything we learned from that client project and then we bring it over into, Christmas Carol. Same stuff with the pixel streaming things that we've done for other clients. Same stuff with the multiplayer system. If you watch the Four Seasons talk and hear me talk about us designing our own multiplayer system, same thing happening in Christmas Carol now. It will look to you like you're in a multiplayer experience. Unreal will not think you're in a multiplayer experience. Unreal will think it's all single player. There's no replication or anything like that, but we're sending the same mocap data and OSC cues and all this stuff to everyone at the same time, which actually allows us to have a lot more control over everything that's happening. And you don't run into a lot of the problems with a typical host client model where the host needs to do something first before it can happen for everyone else. That's particularly a problem when it comes to things like loading levels, where the host needs to load the entire level first and then all the clients load it. So you essentially double the load time.
Oh, interesting. Huh. I hadn't thought about that. Well, that's very cool. It sounds like, this is part of that talk you were mentioning, the Unreal Fest talk.
Yeah, the Four Seasons talk, I go into a little bit of detail about how we needed to set up the whole local multiplayer system using a kind of proprietary multiplayer method that we built ourselves. And I think there's going to be a course about this as well for the authorized training stuff. And we will teach it as part of our authorized training center in Manhattan too. Also, fun fact on that, I queried the socials about if people would be interested in a 5-day series of courses all around virtual reality and using virtual reality in Unreal Engine. And that got a really good response. So keep an eye on alexcoulompresents.com, and we will probably have an announcement in the next couple weeks about a week of those VR courses sometime in February.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, maybe I need to take that. I haven't done any VR development in quite a long time. So I could use a refresher.
Speaking of virtual reality development in Unreal Engine, time for a PSA. So we decided to upgrade Christmas Carol from 5.2 to 5.3 to take full advantage of single pass, stereo instancing with Lumen and Nanite, among some other neat features. But we are doing face tracking with the MetaQuest Pro. So yes, we needed the Meta XR plugin for 5.3. We upgraded everything else. We got all of our Rococo ducks in a row and everything we're doing with Agora for audio and WebSockets and all that. That was all fine upgrading from 5.2 to 5.3. if you go and you download the Meta XR plugin for Unreal Engine, they're going to give you a couple warnings, which are good to know. Like, oh, hey, if you want to play VR in the editor, you need to disable OpenXR first. Oh, that's something that hasn't been true for a long time. You got to re-enable it whenever you're going to make a build. Fine. It's a little bit annoying, but okay. We ran into this problem, though, where we noticed all of a sudden, when we upgraded to 5.3, we weren't getting any build errors, no packaging problems, but anytime we would try to run the build, it wouldn't open in VR. And I had a very late night going through this, being like, what is going on? Like, I've got a VR template, simple project that has the Meta XR plugin working, and everything's fine. It's packaging fine. It's running in VR fine. And then we have our project, which isn't working. So I then embarked on a bit of a Ship of Theseus scenario. Jacob, are you familiar with the Ship of Theseus?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you tell our listeners very briefly what that is?
Sure. The Ship of Theseus is the philosophical discussion around if you take it's around some, I don't know, Greek ancient mythical boat where you take every plank apart and you put it back together somewhere else. Is it still the Ship of Theseus, or is it more than the sum of its parts? Is the TLDR.
Yeah, so I ended up doing something similar where it's like I started with, I have this VR template project, it's working, everything's behaving the way I want it to in a packaged build, and I was slowly replacing, all my enhanced input actions and all my content with everything from our Christmas Carol project, and it's like still working, and I got to the point where I had literally migrated the entire project over to the VR template project, and like, it's working. It's fine. It's great. So I sent a message at like 4 a.m. in the morning to the team, like, hey, I don't know what I solved. Maybe there's a corrupted asset or something. And everyone said, cool, like, go ahead and push it. So I pushed it onto the GitHub. Everyone tried to build it, and it still wasn't opening in VR. So, Jacob, can you guess what we discovered the problem actually was?
Git and source control.
Git, yes. For some reason, and this is specific to the Meta XR 5.3 plugin, if you try to package any project from Git, any kind of source control going on, it won't give you any errors when you're packaging, but it will not open in VR. It's the most bonkers bug I've ever encountered. And I tried it with like just the VR template. Like I just brought it in, created a new, GitHub project, tried to package it, won't open in VR.
Huh. That's pretty interesting. That's like, yeah.
And also, not that a lot of people are using the face tracking and the eye tracking from the MetaQuest Pro, especially over Oculus Link, but that doesn't work at all with the Meta XR 5.3 plugin standalone. So in our case, what we realized is if we do want to be in 5.3, which we do, we actually need to use the Meta XR fork of Unreal Engine 5.3 in order to get all those features working. And fun fact, if you do use the Meta XR fork of Unreal Engine 5.3, it will package from Git. So there's just something weird that happened when they went from their total, offshoot of Unreal Engine 5.3 and saying, hey, everyone, here's a plugin. It should give you all those features. Not true.
Interesting. So, man, I have so many questions, but I won't get too into it. But like, if you took the zip folder of the project and like moved it to another computer, did it work or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I could do it on the same computer. So I would literally, I'd pull all the latest changes that everyone had, try to package it, no VR. I then copy everything, literally everything in the folder except for the, invisible.git folder. And I'm including derived data cache and intermediate and saved. And it's over there in a new folder that isn't connected to source control at all. And I open it up and I package it and everything works. VR works. It's utterly bizarre, Jacob.
So then you just got to check what Git is ignoring, which is probably all your derived data cache and everything else, right?
But Git ignore and those should not affect packaging at all, think, right?
Yeah.
Because that's more for when you're like pushing to, source.
Kind of sounds like someone at Meta is writing out some important data to temporary locations and screwing you over. I'm sorry to hear that.
There's something weird going on. And by the way, I did actually try just deleting my my git ignore and my what's the other one that's in a typical folder. I deleted like everything related to that except for the Git folder. And yeah, it didn't affect anything.
Interesting. Yeah, weird. Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, git attributes. That's the other one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
deleted git attributes and git ignore. So like, leave all this alone. You know, I even tried pushing those changes in case that mattered. And yeah, no dice. So just want to warn people that if you're pulling your hair out because things aren't running properly, that could be the problem.
That's very strange.
Yeah. Okay, I got one more thing to rant about, and then we can probably call it a night. Apple, Jacob,
Yeah.
you've missed the past few weeks with me like being an Apple user for the first time since 1995. Really, I already went through this with moving over to iPhone after nothing but Android phones for a very long time. That was relatively smooth. Like, I still think things like autocorrect are better on Android than iPhone, but like, I'm pretty happy with, you know, the iPhone 12 Pro Max I had and the iPhone 15 that I have now. But then I got a Mac because of the Apple Vision Pro development stuff. It's like, I used to develop stuff on Unity for Mac a while ago, but I never actually bought a Mac because using Unity Cloud, you could do all the Xcode stuff through the cloud, which was quite nice. So I was able to deploy all of my apps and everything that we were doing without actually owning a Mac. For the Apple Vision Pro stuff, I know that for this workshop I'm going to on Wednesday, they want you to bring your own equipment. And I was like, okay, time for us to bite the bullet and get something. So I bought a Mac Mini. Pretty good deal on it. It was like $1,300 with an M2 Pro. And then it only had 512 gigabytes of space, but I thought, no problem. I'll just connect a 8 terabyte SSD drive to it, like an external drive. No, that doesn't work. Mac really does not like dealing with anything external. Like, all the stuff I was trying to do with Unreal Engine, especially with Perforce and UGS, got real angry at me. And I was, getting pretty frustrated for the first like couple weeks of trying to use that.
Weird. That's very strange. What kind of like errors were you getting?
Python errors. I was getting a lot of Python errors that talk about like, you know, UFS mount not expected, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And then what was the other thing too? Oh, and I also just kept running out of space. And I don't know if that's like a derived data cache thing or something like that. But as much as I was trying to put as many things as I could off onto my external drive, they just still, somehow my cache or whatever was still filling up that 512 gigabytes on the main drive pretty quick. Also, about a week into using the Mac Mini, the hard drive stopped being recognized on startup, and the only way I could get the hard drive to appear again was by using disk cleanup, and disk cleanup would take, or not disk cleanup, what's it called, like disk management or something. So I need to run this like diagnostic thing, and at some point in that process it recognizes the hard drive again, and then everything's running. But like, boy, what a headache if I needed to like jump into something really quick.
I've never heard of any of this. I feel like you really angered the Mac god somewhere. I don't know. Like, I've had a lot of Macs. I've never heard of some of this stuff, man. But
yeah, hey, I'm getting the impression this is unusual. Two more quick weird things that happened. The first time the Mac told me, oh, by the way, we need to update to a new version of OS X or whatever, I said, great. It did the update, it restarted and said like, something's wrong, everything needs to be like reformatted. And I was like, I just did the update that you told me to do. Why did this happen?
That's dude, I've never had any. I've had a lot of Macs. I've never had any of this happen. That's wild. I really think you like, it sensed your hesitation and decided to just do you in for this experience. Like, you're not a Mac user, get out of here, you know.
Yeah, but I have learned a lot. Like, I know so many terminal commands now, and so many things related to like, I finally figured out how to use like Homebrew and installed a bunch of things that way, and set up a bunch of pathing to work easily. The U-shell stuff with UGS I've got a pretty good handle on now. So I wasn't expecting all that. One other tip I have for anyone who comes at this cold, and I don't think this is specific to my experience, if you do put a lot of stuff on an external hard drive, be careful because Mac can take forever to delete it. So I had an entire source build of Unreal Engine 5.4 on the external hard drive, and then I wasn't using it anymore, so I tried to delete it. It sat there emptying my trash can for 18 hours, and it still wasn't done by the end. So that was
what are
sad.
You doing, man? I got more questions. Like, how old was this hard drive? Like, did you connect it with like a straw or something? Like,
it's a USB 3.1, standard, and it's a WD Western Digital black drive. Yeah, it's, a drive that I've used before. One thing that someone pointed out, which could be true, is I left it in the exFAT format because I wanted to still use it on Windows and Mac. And someone told me that if you really want external drives to work well on Mac, you should use that other file formatting system that's Mac specific.
That is very true. So exFAT is Windows. Is the Windows standard format, I think, right?
Well, I thought NTFS is.
I can't remember. Yeah. So Mac is like what you'd call POSIX-ish. So POSIX is like all of Linux, and like most OSs are built around like this POSIX ecosystem. So like Bash and a bunch of other languages that are built around using terminals and stuff like that. All related here, and Mac kind of has a similar lineage, but that is very interesting around the drive format. I would definitely take that seriously, but are you using like a dongle to connect this thing?
No, it's a direct. It's the, I don't even know what
like
kind of USB you call it, but the little thin one.
Yeah.
The little thing that's like a little bit longer on the hard drive side, and then it just plugs into a standard USB-A 3 port.
Weird. Well,
directly into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
By the way, this all being said, I do like the form factor of the Mac Mini. Like, it's a very nice little compact size, and if it was working a lot better, I'd feel very comfortable about traveling with it with a little, portable keyboard and portable monitor. But the way this story ends, by the way, is I got so frustrated with it that I did end up biting the bullet again and actually getting a MacBook Pro with an M1 Max 2 terabyte hard drive, 64 gigabytes of RAM, and I got a really good deal on it. It was used and on sale on B&H Photo for $1,600, and I believe it retail value when it first came out back in late 2021, it was $4,200.
Yeah.
So the listing was like, oh, there's some scratch marks on it, like that's why we lowered the price so much. And I'm like, oh, I hope the operating system isn't broken. But I just got that a couple days ago, and that's been running relatively smoothly, all things considered, and I have nothing external attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, I use the 15-inch MacBook Air every day. That's my everyday laptop. I think it's like a perfect laptop. I love that thing.
Yeah.
But I do everything remotely. Like I do everything. I just remote into cloud resources all the time. So I don't actually use the local machine all that much for stuff.
Yeah, and that seems to be the nice thing about it, is if you like the standard operating system and the way it all works, you can kind of remote into anything you need. So a lot of people, I was like, oh, do I need to get the M3 version? And what a lot of people told me is like, the M1 silicone is very, very good, especially if you get a Pro or a Max version. And there's really not going to be that much of a perceivable difference if you go M2 or M3. And so far, in my limited experience, that's definitely been true. Like, I'm able to do all the things I'm trying to do, including running Unreal Engine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm very excited to hear about your experience at Apple and everything that goes down there. Do we want to jump into one last little thing here about the Halcyon before we wrap up?
Yeah, we're definitely doing a lot of catch up. But for those who don't recall, always excited when someone's like, I listen to every episode, like I know about all this stuff. But for those who don't recall, I did mention briefly in a previous episode that after those of us went to the Halcyon in Florida, we had started kind of a community GitHub project. This was our 2-part finale for the end of season 1 of the Unofficial Unreal Engine podcast. And so what ended up happening was we gathered quite a nice community. And I want to give a particular shout out to Marshall on my team, who ended up creating a really nice version of the Sublight Lounge. And where is this? It's probably in the general channel. Let me go overlay. The people are also building this in like Rec Room and things like that.
Oh, that's cool.
But where is the Sublight Lounge? So we have the GitHub, which anyone can join, github.com/AgileLens/HalcyonVR. And the Discord is open for anyone to join. And here we go. So here's a little bit of what like the Sublight Lounge looks like. So there's my Polycam scan. So pretty rough and messy. And then it's just starting to get laid out as like a cleaner model. And we've got a little Sabat game with some basic rules starting to be built there. And this feels pretty good. And then we've got this rock star. His name's Nick, and he is from, I believe, Gearbox. And Gearbox, or sorry, I was going to call him Gearbox Nick, decided to jump into modeling the atrium, which is the main, area that most people spend the time in. This is where like the lightsaber battles and all the major plot points happen. And he's doing a wonderful job here. So he just put this into the GitHub as well.
For those of you who are just listening to this, I recommend you pop on the YouTube to check this out. But we're seeing just a really awesome kind of like moody interior. Like all the lighting is really nice. Like has all the color of the lighting. But really nicely detailed. All the surfaces seem really well finished. Like put some effort into the materials. Like pretty awesome.
Yeah. And these little bench things, like just seeing these again makes my shins hurt. It was so easy to walk into these things without noticing them. They're just like a little bit too low to be in your lower peripheral vision.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm glad to see that that's coming along.
Yeah, it's been a really cool project, and we've been working with these students from the University of British Columbia who've also started to build some of the characters, like the captain and all that, and Wraith Cole. So, and then of course looking at like exploring all this with in-world AI. So we are very excited to see where all this goes.
Oh, cool! So you're gonna like throw in some actors and like try and get it all the way. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the stretch goal would be like, well, step one is like, let's get all the environments in there. So it's just a nice architectural walkthrough. But then to actually get to a point where we could maybe even like have some event where some of the actual actors who are part of the original run put on a VR headset and come in and use some of the tools that we've been building out for things like Christmas Carol and engage and interact with other people who come into the experience live. That would be a pretty awesome culmination of so many of the different things we've been involved with.
So do you have like a generic brand, intellectual property, protector here? Like, is this going to be, like, I don't know, like
are we going to
Moon
get sued by Disney?
Or
is your
like,
question?
Have you come up with something?
Yeah, as far as I've been told, speaking to some of the actual Imagineers who worked on Halcyon VR, is it seems like the basic modus operandi with all things Disney, Star Wars in particular, is it's all actually kind of fair game, free use, do whatever you want, as long as it's not commercial, as long as we don't start charging people ticket prices or trying to find a way to make money from this, and it's all kind of like fan community, then it's okay. Like you'll notice that if I were to go to the GitHub, github.com/AgileLens/HalcyonVR, we've got some language in the front there that is very much intended to be making sure people know. I'm just trying to pull it up so I can read it out loud. TV screen connected. Oh, interesting. The screen didn't update.
There we go.
There we go. Great. Yeah. So what we say here is Halcyon VR is a fan community and open source project that aims to remake and preserve as much as possible that is allowed of the Disney Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser experience in VR and flat screen. It is not associated with Disney in any way. This is a documentation effort using publicly available assets and has no commercial outcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, that seems pretty safe.
Yeah. So I think we're okay.
That's awesome, though.
But it's been really cool to see like the kind of stuff people are gravitating towards. And, some of the people looking at this are big Star Wars fans and some people are not and just love an excuse to like build things in Unreal Engine. There's some coders, some 3D artists. Here's a little bit of what the Sabacc thing looks like.
How much reference did all these people pull together? Like, did you find some folks with more photos and more information?
Yeah, a lot of people have really good photos. A lot of people took good 360 images. As far as I know, I'm still kind of the king of 3D scans. Almost all of the 3D scans people are using are ones that I took myself. I was really hoping to get some Gaussian splats of the space as well. And Polycam actually started allowing you to reprocess your photogrammetry setups, but you needed to have not deleted the source files. And one of the reasons I got my iPhone 15 was I was just having so much trouble keeping the iPhone 12 not full with the 128 gigabytes of space it had. And a lot of those were things like scans. So like right before I got the iPhone 15, I cleared out a bunch of my old Polycam data, including all the stuff that I had from Galactic Star Cruiser.
No.
So if it had been like another 3 days and I wasn't so low on space, I would have been able to turn all those into Gaussian splats.
Oh, man, did you like scour through iCloud yet?
Like whose iCloud? Like my iCloud?
You never know. Everything gets saved up there.
Not so the Polycam stuff generally doesn't get uploaded automatically. Like it does get kept in its own little folder, and I think at some point it does ask you if you want to upload those things to iCloud or Google Photos. But I think I pretty quickly said like, no, there's like hundreds and hundreds of photos here. Don't do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, looks like our video feed here is. Oh, it looks like it's back. All right, just to the listeners, our faces froze for a second there, so ignore the concern for now.
Yeah.
Anyways, well,
so yeah,
this has been a wild ride of an episode. It's been nice catching up on everything. Man, so much to come. So next time we speak, you'll probably be back from Apple, and we won't be able to talk about it, but we'll...
I'll have very cryptic hints.
Yeah, we'll share in excitement, at least. And man, I can't wait to see Christmas Carol. Definitely everyone check that out if you haven't seen it, or if you have, check it out anyways. I will.
Yeah. And let us know if you're going to be in Miami, because I'll be there for FilmGate Interactive. I'll be leaving right from the Apple event on November 29th, headed to LaGuardia, and then I'll fly right to Miami, and we're going to get set up for the premiere of the show down there. And Jackie will be with us operating the VCam, so you'll actually get to see her like as a camera operator for the virtual experience live. Which will be pretty neat. And then for the real-time conference, I'll be part of 2 talks for that in a couple weeks. One will be actually with Jose and Neil again, and we'll be chatting in a more casual way about the Four Seasons project. And then I think we're going to be part of a demo with Radical AI showing off their single cam mocap stuff, which is actually something we wanted to get into Christmas Carol. The only problem is their system right now only does this mocap with the editor, and it can't work in a packaged build, and for a number of reasons we needed to mostly be in packaged builds. So anyway, that's something we'll continue to explore, but we'll give a nice little Christmas Carol demo of that for people to see, so be sure to check those out. Jacob, are people going to be able to see you anywhere anytime soon?
Anytime soon? Probably not. Like I said, I just wrapped up the convention season for me, and I'm looking forward to staying home for a few months here. Next time I'm heading out will probably be around GDC, GTC in March. So, I can look forward to those. Otherwise, I'll catch everyone right here on the podcast.
Yeah, amen to that. Thanks so much to Alan Scott for editing the Unofficial Unreal Engine podcast. Thanks to Vikas Reddy and everyone at Light Twist, who, as you might have seen, have given us a brand spanking new studio. During the intro with all the banners, it feels like we've got like an army ready to assemble for us.
Yeah,
cool.
we are the Galactic Empire. That's the synopsis here. Well, definitely make sure you like, rate, subscribe, all those things, and comment, please. Let me know how boring VPNs are.
Or how amazing.
Maybe you check out some VPNs. You're like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever, and you start launch a career in networking. I hope not. It's a pretty brutal career path, but hey, some people like it, so that could be you.
Well put, Jacob. Thanks everyone so much. We'll see you next time. Cheers.